So we're here for a special edition of 2Techies. This is not typical. Even though I'm in Philly, I'm with my man Chris, and Chris has come down to Miami about 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
And I've had the honor of being a part of Technically panels. And if you guys don't know them, it's okay. Keep rolling.
So we're doing it live. We're doing it live.
No, we're live. It's okay.
We're always live at all times. It's fine.
Really personal.
It was going there. It's cool.
It was emotional. I'm already emotional. It was my grandmother, and
so it's what happens when you're filming live.
it's just live, doing it live.
And I just want to get into
Just a heads up. That was a burglar, and immediately saw us and was intimidated and left. So
he just changed his whole mind.
Changed his mind. So not interested in stealing and robbing this place. So like that's we got here.
So Chris, besides being great, when did you fall in love with tech, man?
Yeah. So I am not in love with tech, and it's actually something that I always like pushing on.
That's the first time we've gotten this answer on 2Techies. So you're actually a non-technical person having this conversation.
Right.
And your company's name Technically.
It's right. There's a lot of things. Yeah. So we're a news organization, and our dominant focus is covering reporting on technologists and entrepreneurs that focus on technical fields. I worry that we are mystified by technology, and we forget that it is meant to be a tool to serve people. And so I try to really resist fetishizing technology. So I never fell in love with technology. I'm inspired by what can be done when great, well-intentioned people use technology.
Okay.
But I want to focus on the people behind it, because I get worried. Now that's not to say my co-founder is more properly someone who loves and has grew up caring about technology, and was on a command line and playing gaming and looked a lot more like that. So I don't dismiss it. I just think I don't want it to be a requirement to be involved in communities that leverage technology. So that's my controversial approach.
So what are some of the main things with Technically? I mean, the name itself is so defiant.
Right.
But you have more of a journalistic background in general. I mean, what were you doing before Technically? How did you get to that point?
Yeah, I'd actually push on 2 things. So one, really the origin of the name Technically, a network of local technology news sites. When we were first choosing the name, we didn't even love the name, but what we did love was that we thought it characterized how we wanted to approach coverage. That we were like, it's technically technology. But if you look at our coverage, it's always been much more about people. We've tried to deepen, like we do, because as more folks have covered young tech companies, we find that very rarely they dive into what the technology they actually are working on is. I have a wonderful memory of a colleague of mine was doing a panel interviewing a prominent tech leader in one of our communities, and said, what is another tech company in the city that you care about, or you think that everyone should know about? And he gave an answer, and then our reporter said, could you just share with the audience a little more about what they do? And he was like, to be honest, I have no idea what they do. And it was this incredibly representative moment that it's just about brand identity, and if they're cool, and that terrified me. So Technically, our name has always meant to be about, roughly we're talking about technology. We're really talking about people who are impacting cities. We want to talk about, making sure we're doing stuff that matters. So, as a segue to what you actually asked me about what I was doing before Technically, I come from a journalism background. I most recently before Technically, despite in between a little bit of a traveling spell, I was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, covering the state capitol, sitting in front of state legislator doors, chasing down quotes on wonky policy. Right. So not tech, it was holding leaders to account, and that's always been my lens. That I always thought I was going to end up being when I was 22, I thought I was going to be a city hall reporter for some large city, and what I found is what I actually cared about was the power that telling stories can do for creating an identity, and how important an identity can be for a city, for something like technology or other ways that it powers.
Because I've had 3 powerful moments in the last 7 days. One was, of course, realizing that I was actually a venture partner with Southbox, working with John. That was great. 2 of them happened at the same time. That was Rodney Williams and Leslie Miley wishing me a happy birthday. And those are two powerful dudes in technology.
Yeah.
Most people get excited about other things. Like, you could have been a rapper or a hip hop artist or politician, but
A great meal is what I thought you were going to say.
something. But two tech guys hit me up that I really look up to.
Yep.
And then seeing your email and you remembering me.
Oh, come on.
And when
now.
you've been to the city, and that's when I realized I wanted to tell you, you were one of the people that influenced Digital Grass to pivot.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Because I realized, like you're saying, we talk a lot about the technology, but sometimes we forget about the people. And then the way you guys were focusing, the way we kind of did it, it's like, but it needs to become hyper local. You need to be the interconnectivity, because the media is grazing over us, or it's become so much just the negative of diversity and inclusion, the negative of women in tech. And nobody's have these uplifting stories where it's like, hey, learn this about Philly, learn this about Miami, DC. And when I saw your map, I was like, Chris led me here, because your conversations when you came to Miami were always deeper than just, well, let's talk about this. It was like, no, let's talk. No, let them say what he's, I remember you saying that one time when I was on stage, he was like, no, let him finish, let him say it. But it was so authentic. And I was like, if I could do this, I would start putting out content, because I'm not a writer.
Yeah.
I'm a spoken word artist, so I'm more natural on camera and with voice. So I was like, well, how can I use myself to create this lane for other people? And that's how I led here. So I wanted you to know that you were one of the influencers.
That's beautiful. I'm proud to be a part of it.
Yes.
Like I love the format also of saying we need to talk about something. Because again, I want to echo that. I don't dismiss the need to get deep with technology. I just don't want that to be the only way you can approach.
Right.
Because we see constantly in coverage, in events, how often you have to reduce walls, metaphorical, literal, because people are intimidated by technology. The joke of I can't get my printer to work is real. It creates
IT protocols and everything else.
Exactly. It creates an aging population feeling distracted from meaningful conversations. Like, we talk about all the different communities of inclusion that get pushed out because we create obstacles, or so I think there's a delicate balance of, I want us to be able to have serious conversations, and so sometimes we do get very deep, technical. I do want us to say, no, it's not just a SaaS company. Why is it unique? Like, I want us to get a little bit deeper, or
past the surface level of just your responses. You want to know the truth.
But how do you pair that with? Sure, it doesn't necessarily matter what kind of SaaS company it is. It matters, did they get across 100,000 square feet in office space? Because every 100,000 square feet of office space, you get 2 to 5 non-college educated people who get work by way of trash pickup or maintenance or like administrative roles or other things. So those are the levers you start saying, why do we care about highly scalable technology companies for cities? The real reason we care about them is, with high profitability, can create wealth creation that, God willing, can have impact on cities. But it also means, with business growth, traditionally we can get people to get access, like the social justice conversation of coding schools. How long will that last? Who knows? But those are propped up by a need for talent in tech companies. So,
and then that goes into the overlook. Yeah, you're looking at the impact of what you're doing in high schools and middle schools, but what about the right nows? What about the college students that still don't even know what they want to do when they get out of college?
Yes.
So how you start targeting them to build up that community? So it's a whole different challenge.
Yeah, and it's ranging.
You cover that.
Yeah, and try to. And I think it's important to know that there's the negative side where you assume, the tech community will solve everything. I think I want to caution against that too. That you have to thread that right needle. We've always wanted to. This is maybe a better lens to say it. A word that I have, night terrors about is the word cheerleader. We'll get called that a lot. That they're a cheerleader for the local tech community, and it's a word that for lots of people, they mean it positively. They say I just mean that something that's undercovered. You are cheerleading, you're amplifying that message. And of course, that's a version of it that you can't deny. But that word can get insidious because, the cheer squad always cheers for the basketball team, even if they're jerks or they are losing or they...
Because I would say you're more of an advocate for the outcomes.
Yeah, and I like that, for the outcomes.
Yeah, because if the process is horrible, you're not there to cheer them on. You're there to talk about the issues of the process. So if it's a bad process, you're going to highlight the bad parts,
Yep.
or you're just not going to cover it.
Yep.
But it's like you're saying, you can't cheer along a company that's still dealing with sexual harassment charges, and you overlook that, but you're like, but they just raised another round. Well, no, they just had a whole bunch of horrible things happen too, and that's something we want to talk about.
Yep.
So it's being unbiased, but I think that's something you learn with being a journalist, though.
And I think that's what we think that journalism can be. You can still, the way I've said it to people we report on, like, we are biased. We want anyone we report on to succeed. Secretly, every journalist wants whomever they cover to succeed because, frankly, that's great for them. Oh, I'm covering this like surging success.
It's like breaking a record.
Yeah, you want that person to break the record. You want someone to, you want Barry Bonds to break the record.
Right.
Then sometimes we tearing people down, but that's a separate thing. But we do want people to succeed, and so yes, we want our communities, the ones we report on, 5 East Coast markets, hopefully continue to grow, but trying to follow other communities that are blossoming like Miami. We do want the companies we cover to grow, but we've always felt that lying about it won't even help that entrepreneur. Like, in truth,
You gotta tell the truth.
Yeah, it's not working. It's actually short term. It may feel I'm evading this hard reality. We've covered companies closing, companies being sued, companies doing layoffs, companies funding round falling through, company losing large scale customer that they depended on, and we try to approach it from the lens of like, you can screw up.
Right.
Turns out this is really hard. Growing any company ever is actually really hard. No one wants to talk about that.
Just because you got to get a lot of money doesn't mean you're going to scale.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's really hard. So instead, our intention is you can mess up. I like to believe in whenever I'm stressed about, we're a 25 person young company too. So I'm like, I can mess up too. We're still very small, and young in the pathway. Whenever I am stressed, I try to remind myself that what we tell anyone we report on, if you screw up from when you're a 3-year-old to when you're running a company, if you instead say, here's what I learned from and what I think other people can learn from, if you can, from the outset, say, I see where something's wrong, you can self-correct, no one hates you.
Right.
Like, you will be okay.
You have to pivot. You have to be willing to adjust.
Yes. And then we don't want to talk about that.
Let me get to know you, though.
Ooh.
Craft beer, craft cocktail. What will we be drinking?
Craft cocktail. That's like not the right answer, but craft cocktail.
What's the drink of choice?
I am normally an old-fashioned kind of fella. I do a lot of, if I have a bourbon or a scotch, I will sometimes do it neat, but I do. An old-fashioned is my happy hour cocktail of choice.
I'll make sure I send you a bottle of scotch. I'll send you a bottle of scotch.
Exchange.
Your business life, if it was based on a movie or a TV show, what would we be watching?
Ooh, I think the real person version of the Flintstones. No, I don't have.
We're gonna go with that. We're gonna move on.
Yeah, we'll go with that. I feel like it's like you've seen the animated version, but this is the serious version.
I see it.
There's a few stars in there, but they're later in their career.
Well, you've nowhere close to peak now. You got a lot of growing to do. You got a lot. All right. So, what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing with Technically itself, though?
We are at our core, really more community journalism organization, which means for too long we've operated in pretty lean margins. So we're profitable, but we're like under 5% margins, and we've always wondered, do we want to say some of the recurring revenue we have on a digital platform? We do a lot with helping people hire talent. Whether we should run fast forward with that and cut out lower performing business lines to get to a higher margin and show higher growth, or whether we at our core a community journalism outfit and we should expect lower growth. Actually, growth's fine. We're actually growing by 40% this year, but it's the margins. Yeah, the margins are always tight. So we were 1.7 million in revenue in 2016. We'll be about 2 million in 2017 this year. So the challenge is that margin question and who you are as an organization, which I think is so interesting that you have to constantly ask yourself: are we a community journalism organization, and so modestly profitable is amazing? When we're in that group, we are an outlier. The fact that we are
but you're profitable and you're doing something for the community,
right?
So to me, your margins mean a lot more than anybody else.
Fair, but still, that like I want to grow. I want, we have staff that have been with us for years. They want to say, how is our continued growth?
Next?
And I think we do that with a greater focus. I think margin and knowing who we are as an organization.
You've covered it, but I've never gotten to hear your response because you're always asking the questions. Ooh. Diversity, inclusion. What's your emotions towards it right now?
So 2 things that to me jump out a lot. Like we know through the literature how important it is. I think we too focus on the smallest version of what diversity and inclusion means.
Versus the large scope, yes.
Yep. I think a lot about age actually. So
ageism, yes.
A year ago, my co-founder, who's a year older than I am, who's 32, was the oldest person on our staff, and we felt like we were not building an organization that was represented for lots of people, and 3 of our last 5 hires have been 35 or more, which is obviously not vastly older, but
it's a big change in what you're doing. Yeah?
Yep. So like, yes, broadest scope, but also it has to mean everything. We know people of color, we know women are not represented where they need to be in technical fields, in journalism fields, in lots of fields. Mm-hmm. So one, I think important tip, so my co-founder, I don't know if the viewers can see, I happen to be a white male. It's how I identify, so I wasn't sure. So I've had that question of, can you have an organization that's founded by 2 white men, middle class, went to the same university, from the same broad geographical region? Can you ever break out? Can you ever represent the communities that you want to serve when you're covering a variety of them? And I don't think I could say that I know that answer, but one of the biggest changes that happened that I think is my strongest tip for any entrepreneur, particularly, a white male, but I think any entrepreneur, I think any entrepreneur, is wherever you are, you have to rep some constituency. We did a funny story, one interesting story. We had a story on 3 black co-founders and said their first hire was a white woman. They're like, that's the biggest diversity hire we could do. We didn't have any perspective for white women. Said like that was our big clientele. We needed that.
That would matter, yeah.
But one thing that changed in our hiring practice was saying, look, ultimately we know we want the best person for the job, and one of the biggest outs that companies that don't deal with diversity, one of the biggest cheats, they say, yeah, I just was the best person for the job, that's what I can do. But what we did that I think we got right early on that meant a lot was saying, sure, final candidate choice, yep, just has to be about who's the best at the table. But the check you have to do for yourself, when you look at the handful of your finalists, if they don't represent whatever community you're representing in some sense, if they don't represent it, then your pipelines are just broken, and you're never going to get the finalist that you want.
That makes sense.
So we never focused on what the finalist should be, we focused on the pipeline. And we did a couple times. We went through our hire and said, look, we have 5 finalists, they're all white men. The pipeline was broken. And we
start the problem before you get to a finalization. Fix the problem in the beginning.
Yeah, it's the pipeline. And so what changed in the last several years is that we've built a framework, and then once your team is, we're 60% women, we're more than a third people of color. Guess what? Now when we hire, actually, just because of our network effect, we actually don't do a lot of extra effort.
It's natural because you built a company culture.
The company, our teammates share the roles, and so their own networks, and then you have to start early on. It only gets harder
if you wait. Yeah.
But if you start early and you say it's about pipeline, that's what was the shift. So it's very hard early on, and there's 1,000 reasons that you want to cheat on it because you have 1,000 things to care about when you're growing a company. But that part gets easier, and that we still talk about it a lot, but that's not quite our challenge when we are hiring.
I was going to ask you the question, how would you fix it? What would be the solution if you had unlimited resources? But for me, your answer is the solution.
Yeah,
if you get to the point where every time you see the same results, you already know internally there's something in your company to fix.
Yeah.
That's profound, man.
I still think it's age I worry about still for us. But
even then, if you say they're all within a 10-year age span, we're not doing enough. Yep. We need to expand it, even if it's not color at that point. Yep. Even if it's not gender. You can look at all categories and say the profiles look too familiar. So that makes sense. Yep. All right, so the world is yours. You get to choose one mentor for a year, unlimited access. Have to be alive. Who would your mentor be?
Ooh, that is a very telling question. Wow. So many corny ideas are coming to my mind. Don't want a corny answer. Want an interesting answer. This is going to be
just tell us
corny.
The truth.
Yeah, there's a few that are coming to mind that are corny, but like what the first name that popped in my mind was the comedian Louis C.K.
Really? Well, Louis has said some. His interviews have been getting really great.
Yeah. Yes. Like he's deeply philosophical. He's obviously a philosopher of the moment. But I actually being really interested in how he's adapted what his relationship with his community should be. It's like very audience driven,
right.
and how and what distribution can look like when you reach a scale. I also am, to go back to age, and I think about this a lot, that narrative of there's a handful of people I respect a lot who they really didn't get their national success until their 40s or beyond.
Right.
And I've seen a few interesting interviews about how that changed them. They just worked as hard as they could doing what they thought was most important for as long as they could, and they remained this truly authentic person. As opposed to people who get success very early on and you're basically ruined.
Yeah.
If you have success, if you have too much,
you got to be grounded. You got to know yourself. I got you.
So that's something that stands out.
There's a soundtrack to your life. If there was a song or an album that's representing your life, what are we listening to?
So I will say the same thing that I'm sure everyone always says who's ever answered the question, and the preface is, yes, I listen to a wide variety of music. But what I will go with, I suspect this is going to be different. I grew up in a relatively rural corner of New Jersey. Yes, okay. That exists. Northwest New Jersey, shout out Sussex County. Jersey Tomato, Black Bear kind of thing. So I grew up listening to country music, actually.
Okay, me too.
So, okay, interesting. So I grew up in country. Yeah, because you grew up in
Alabama.
Alabama. Mm-hmm. Right, okay. So I grew up in country music. So, for all of what most of America knows about him, I think is a bad caricature. Willie Nelson actually had such depth. What a songwriter.
Well, because a lot of his pop stuff, you have to listen to the albums. You can't listen to the songs on the radio.
So the real classic I'm going with is "Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys." Yeah. Because I think you could say that about journalism. You could say that about entrepreneurs. Mamas don't let your babies grow up to be entrepreneurs or journalists. And I think that, I'm going to go with that.
So it's on your tombstone or it's in your eulogy. You've retired. You're gone. How do you want to be remembered? What's the legacy you want to
leave? Gave a shit, wasn't a dick. That if I get actually cared, genuinely cared, and on the whole was well-intentioned enough that he just wasn't a piece of shit. I think that's because collectively that's the message I would want to anyone, because there's lots of constraints. There's life constraints that hold you back, social economic, there's 1,000 reasons that can hold you back, but I think a pretty universal thing that everyone can do
is always be a good person.
Yep, I wasn't shit. And sometimes you're gonna have to choose yourself over someone else, and that is definitionally
sometimes you have to be selfish, but you still don't have to be a shitty person while doing it.
On the whole, mostly well-intentioned and care. Because people who don't give a fuck I have no patience.
You can still be an asshole and care.
Yeah. I just want you to be I want things to get a little bit better
than what they were.
Whatever lane you're in. If it's just you, I have a very vivid memory. One of my first relationships to neighborhood life was I lived on a block and there was this little old woman, and I had this memory of her. She sweeped out in front of her house like nobody's business. That 8 sidewalk square was the cleanest 8 sidewalk squares ever. And I remember feeling so much that, for whatever constraints she might be living in, and I don't know what else she was doing, but perhaps that this was a contribution that said, yep, that this my space will be cared for, attended for. If anyone comes through, this is it. And I always found that very beautiful. That anyone, you can take. It doesn't matter what your constraints are. You can offer what you can to where you are, and that I would take that.
I normally give people the pleasure of asking me one question and put me in a hot seat at the end. But you've got to do that to me in interviews.
That's true.
But I'm still gonna give it to you.
All right,
one quick question.
You're constantly generous. What is a mistake that you haven't made yet that you think you're going to?
Not taking a risk with my own money because I'm scared of my own failures.
Mm-hmm.
There's too many times where I've paused and I feel I might miss out on something else. More so because I don't believe in myself. It won't even be other people. So self-doubt. It's something I'm always worried about.
I hit homes. Yeah, I hear that. Where it's just like somebody's gotta just jump.
You just gotta go. Like, you can't take money to the grave. You can't take thoughts to the grave. Like, sometimes I just worry that. So I think there's one thing, and I probably have already done it, but that's the thing I fear the most. That's the thing I'm the most worried about.
Well, because why I think that question is interesting is because it doesn't mean that you haven't done it or you haven't already made this mistake. It's the mistake that like
if you do it again.
Yep.
There's too many times where I've put in other people. If I just put the same passion into my ideas that I have for clients or other things, I probably would be in a better position. Mm-hmm. But that passion comes from other people. You're not as worried on their failure. You're worried on the success of what you do.
Right.
When you're doing it for yourself, it's the success of what you do and the failure, the scrutiny and everything. This would have been one of those things. I'm not a reporter. I'm not this. But I care about the community. So I'm going to be the voice. I'll create the lane that I wanted to see others create. Then like you, I'll hire other people to continue it on, and then I'm just the boss.
Yep. Because I think that the failure that I stay on, because how often like I get stymied by it, it's like I try to do that as much as I can. What's the worst case and the best case? And best case, oh my goodness. And worst case, like, oh, okay, I do it and no one watches it. And then I'm just exactly where I am. Like, that's the worst case.
To me, my best case is I did it. My worst case is I thought about doing it. I never did it.
Yeah.
I rather fail doing it than to always wonder what could happen. As they say, live in the moment.
Yeah.
Live in the moment and die empty.
And that you do that on South Street in Philadelphia. You do it, at South Box.
Wherever there's a camera and wherever I can find a camera crew. We got this amazing woman that came in and filled it. It's like
you're a Temple University graduate, the fine State University. I mean,
2 cameras and a go. 2 cameras and a mic, and I'm on.
Nas needed 1 mic. You needed 1 mic, 2 cameras.
I need 1 mic, 2 cameras. Gotta have that. Gotta have the extra angle.
Nas was always a little bit, more focused.
He's a little bit more profound. He is a rapper, and but I'll be there. I'm gonna have to get that shirt now. 2 cameras and 1 mic.
That's what I need. All I need is 1 mic, 2 cameras.
Chris, close us out with just 1 word, and you know how we did it. You make me do it at your things. We get to make 1 sentence, so we're condensing it.
Yeah.
Just 1 word to close us out with this interview. Not a phrase, not a sentence. 1 word.
Thoughtful.
And that's it, guys. I'm here with my boy Chris from Technically, and we're actually going to try to work on a distribution deal. I'm putting it on camera so he can't back out later.
Let's have it.
But I appreciate this opportunity, and it's always good. You got to understand, we had this idea, and we watched somebody from afar admiring them, and we said we could do this for our community too. So it's one thing to be able to interview the people you look up to. And you're one person I look up to, so I appreciate you being here today.
Totally honored.
Thank you very much.
Totally honored.
All right, guys. 2Techies at South Box.
See you guys.
Thank you, man. And we got you.